Hello and welcome to a guide on how to use task runners with Azure Batch. Now, through this video, I'm going to walk you through how you can set up your task runners inside of the Azure portal and how you can get that all set up correctly, and then how you can then set it up inside of Kestra with the correct credentials so that you can have your tasks running on Azure Batch. To start with, we're going to have to jump into the Azure portal so that we can set it up, and then we'll move into Kestra. So let's jump in. Once you've logged into Azure, you should be presented with the portal. And the first thing we're going to do is create a batch account, which we'll use for being able to create jobs and destroy them with Kestra. So the first thing we're going to do is search for batch, and we can see batch accounts comes up at the top. So we're going to select that option. And once we're on here, we then want to press create, and we're going to make a brand new batch account. Now in here, we need to select a resource group. You can make a new one or use one that already exists. I'm going to use this will-demo one. And then you need to create a name. Now this is important because this will be the name that will also reference inside of Kestra. So make sure that it is something that's easy to write down. I'm going to call it Will Video Demo. And then I'm also going to select the location. I would recommend selecting something close to your location to reduce latency. I'm going to select West Europe. On top of that, we're also going to need a storage account because for any of our tasks that have files associated with them, we're going to need some blob storage to be able to store those files for our task runner to access. So we're going to click that select a storage account on the right hand side. And when we do that, we'll be given the option to create a new one. Once I've clicked create, we can again add a name here. And again, we're going to need this name later, so make it something easy to remember. I'm going to call mine Will Video Demo Storage, and then I'm going to press OK. Now that I've done this, I'm going to press review plus create, and then we can just double check that we're happy with the settings. This all looks good to me, so now I can press create. Now while we wait, it's going to submit a deployment and take a few minutes to set up, so we'll come back once it's done. As we can see, the batch account has been accepted and the storage account has been created. Excellent. So our batch and storage accounts have been created, so now I can click go to resource, and in here we'll be able to see them in action. Now that we've got our batch account, we need to create a few extra things before we can proceed. The first thing is going over to the pools option on the left hand side under features and creating a brand new pool. We're going to need the pool ID inside of Kestra, so make sure it's something that you can remember. We're going to go to pools, click add, and then inside of here, we can add our pool ID. We're just going to call it Will Video Demo Pool. And then we're going to go to image type, leave that to marketplace, publisher to Azure Batch, offer to Ubuntu server container, and the SKU to be 2004 LTS, but just pick whichever one is the LTS model. Then we're going to scroll down until we get to node size, and this will be the size of our task runner. Now, depending on what you're doing, this will vary. For this example, I'm going to pick quite a small node size, but if you're doing something computationally heavy, such as maybe machine learning, then you might want to increase the size of this. But bear in mind, the bigger this is, the more expensive it will be. I'm going to select the standard A1v2, which we can find here. There we go. So 1V CPU and 2 GB of memory. So perfect for this example. And then the last thing we're going to do is select target dedicated nodes and make that 2. Now that I've done that, I can scroll down and ignore everything else and leave those to its default values and then press OK. Because this account already has a number of pools, we've hit the quota, but if we go to a different batch account, you'll actually see that the pools will turn up in a list like so, and we can see the VM size on the side, similar to the one we set earlier. Now that we have our pool set up, we need to go to our storage account and create a container for being able to store those files. So we can now search for storage at the top, and once we do that, we can see storage accounts comes up as an option. Our storage account is the one at the bottom here. We can select that, and then we can easily see that we have the option under data storage to select containers. Now in here, we're going to simply press the plus button up here and then name it something sensible so we can put this into Kestra. I've just called this again Will Video Demo Container. Once I've done that, I can press create. So now we've got a pool that will manage our jobs. We've got a container for storing the files related to our jobs, and we've got a storage account and a batch account, which will be helpful for being able to manage those. Jumping back to our batch account, we're going to need a few extra bits before we can jump into Kestra. To start with, we're going to need some keys so that Kestra can talk to Azure securely. If we scroll down under settings, we can see an option for keys. And if we click on here, we're going to see a few things that we're going to need. Now, if I jump over to our example that you can find in the docs, the example here is looking for 4 different things. We're looking for the Azure account, the Azure access key, the Azure endpoint, and the Azure connection string. We'll worry about the connection string in a second because that's related to the storage account, but we're looking for the account, access key, and endpoint. Going back to Azure, the batch account is what we're looking for here as the account that will go in here. Same for the endpoint, that's going to be our endpoint secret. And then for access key, we've actually got two here because the way Azure does it is it gives you two keys so that if you need to regenerate them, you've always got one working so that stuff never has to go offline. So we can ignore that secondary key for now because we only need one. So we can copy that first one and we can paste that into the access key property, or you can add them as secrets like I have done so here. Now you can see that we've actually got the pool ID and the container also as variables, so you can easily add those in here as well. This is an example from a separate batch account, but again, we would add those values in here so that those would work. The only thing we need to focus on now is creating that Azure connection string. Now, this is a little bit more fiddly, but bear with me, we'll get it created. Now, my recommendation here would be going to the Azure docs where they've got some beautiful documentation on how to configure this string. Now, we want to configure it for a storage account because we're trying to use blob storage. And here, the format we want to use is default endpoint protocol equals, and then it wants us to either pick HTTP or HTTPS. I would recommend using HTTPS. Then we've got account name equals, and then we would put in under my account name, we would put in the account name here, will video demo storage. And then we also want to put the account key in, which here would be key number 1 here. If we fill in those two blanks, we can then paste this in as a secret or directly into the YAML configuration, and that will start working correctly. We can actually see an example here where the storage account name is here and the account key would be here. So pretty easy to set up. Now that we've got that set up and we've got this all configured, we're going to be able to execute this and see that these tasks are running on Azure. Once we've pressed execute, we can head over to our batch account and then scroll down to features. We can see jobs. And in here, we can actually see that our batch account has successfully created a job for the task in Kestra. And we can see that it's currently active right now. If we hop back to Kestra, we can also see that it's created it on the pool and it has started the task with our Python file. So we can see that everything is working as expected. As we can see here, it has successfully finished executing our Python script, which was just getting environment information about our task runner. We can see it's printed it out inside of the terminal in Kestra, and it's generated an output. So if I go back to the outputs tab and click preview, we can see it in a nice JSON format too. And if we go to the task runner inside of Azure's, we can also see that it has completed and it took about 1 minute to run. Hopefully you found that guide helpful and you're going to start using Azure Task Runners in your workflows. These are super useful if you're looking for being able to execute large computational workloads on a separate environment. So let's say your Kestra instance is not very powerful and you want to be able to just tap into extra power when and needed, then Task Runners are perfect. With that in mind, let us know in the comments how you're going to use Task Runners. I'd love to hear about all of the different use cases and how they're helping you automate more of your workflows. If you do have any questions though, make sure to join our Slack community where you can ask questions there and the community will be more than happy to help.